outlined in the State of the Nation. Parliament, as the legislative arm of government, has a constitutional duty to scrutinize these commitments and ensure implementation and ultimately represent the voices of the people. Today, we reflect on these debates and key issues raised before the President takes the podium to respond.
Absolutely, and as we await his reply, we'll continue unpacking the key themes of the debate and major issues shaping our national discourse. To begin with, let's take a look back at the historical framing with a forward-looking vision the President gave us when he opened the State of the Nation address last week. Stay tuned.
My fellow South Africans, this State of the Nation address is taking place as we celebrate 70 years since the adoption of the Freedom Charter at the Congress of the People in Kliptown in 1955. The Freedom Charter is the cornerstone of our democratic constitution. It sets out a vision of a united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic and prosperous South Africa. It also sets out a vision of a country in which government is founded on the will of the people of South Africa, where the land is shared among those who work it, where the people share in the country's wealth and in all that the country produces and are all equal before the law. It is this vision that continues to guide us as we work to build the nation that we all want. It is the spirit of the Congress of the People that inspires us as we prepare for a national dialogue in which South Africans are once again called upon to chart a new path for our country. We must chart this path in a world that is rapidly changing. It is a world of both interdependence and competition, of cooperation and conflict. It is a multipolar world in which new countries are emerging to play a greater role in global affairs. We are seeing intensifying competition over issues such as trade, technology, and influence in global institutions. There are global fundamental shifts underway that affect every aspect of human life, from the growing impact of climate change to rapid advances in artificial intelligence, geopolitical tensions, and violent conflicts. In the face of these challenges, we are witnessing the rise of nationalism, protectionism, the pursuit of narrow interests, and the decline of common cause. This is the world that we, as South Africa, a developing economy, must now navigate. But we are not daunted to navigate our path through this world that constantly changes. We will not be deterred. We are, as South Africans, a resilient people, and we will not be bullied. We will stand together as a united nation, and we will speak with one voice in defense of our national interests, our sovereignty, and our constitutional democracy. By standing true to our values, by harnessing our unique strengths and endowments, and by forging a common purpose, we can turn these trying circumstances to our advantage and propel our country forward. As South Africans, we stand for peace and justice. We stand for equality and solidarity. We stand for a non-racial future, and we stand for democracy and tolerance as well as compassion. We stand for equal rights for women, for persons with disability, and for members of the LGBTQIA+ community. We stand for our shared humanity, not for the survival of the fittest. So this evening, let us speak of the nation that we want. Let us speak of the future that we want to build. Let us speak of the work that we as South Africans must do, and the work that we are doing to build that nation and to build that future. We want a nation united in its diversity. At many difficult moments in our past, we found strength in working together towards a common goal. Through partnership, we brought peace and democracy to our country, which was once troubled. We overcame apartheid, a crime against humanity that denied people their human rights, that deprived them of the land and livelihoods, that sought to strip them of their dignity, that humiliated them. Through partnership, we overcame a devastating pandemic and rebuilt our country in the wake of state capture as well. Together, we have built durable institutions that support our democracy, that protect our fundamental rights and promote the well-being of South Africans. We have built meaningful partnerships between government and business and labor and civil society and other social partners to drive growth and development. These stand as models of cooperation for the rest of the world. South Africans are continuing to work together to confront our country's challenges and build a nation that works for all. Guided by the wishes of the people as expressed in last year's elections, we have formed a government of national unity to give expression to our culture of cooperation. As political parties, we have set aside our differences and agreed to work together for the good of all South Africans.
You're still watching Parliament TV, and that is how the President opened his State of the Nation address last week on the 6th of February. He was setting the scene by anchoring his address on the 70th anniversary of the Freedom Charter, a foundational document of South Africa's democracy. Of course, in doing so, he reminds us of our nation's core values: unity, equality, and shared prosperity, while positioning the current moment as a continuation of the struggle of economic and social justice.
Indeed, he also expands the scope beyond history by placing South Africa within the context of a rapidly changing global landscape. He acknowledges the challenges of geopolitical tensions, economic shifts, climate change, and technological advancements, emphasizing that South Africa must navigate these realities while staying true to its democratic principles.
And that's correct. He also reaffirmed South Africa's commitments to values like democracy, non-racialism, and equal rights for all, including women, persons with disabilities, and the LGBTQI+ community. At a time when we see growing divisions and nationalism in many parts of the world, the President is calling for a united, inclusive approach to development. Of course, he reinforces the idea that while South Africa has come a long way, the journey to a truly inclusive and prosperous nation is still ongoing. With that in mind, much of the debate over the last 2 days has been about questioning how much of the vision espoused in the Freedom Charter has been realized in our country today.
And MPs have raised tough questions over the last 2 days, indeed, on the economy, service delivery, corruption, crime, foreign policy, peace and security, amongst others. The President now has the challenge of addressing these concerns while reinforcing the message that South Africa is on a path forward. So in our program today, and as we build up to the President's replies to the debate on the State of the Nation address at 2 p.m., we are going to look at some of the comments made by members during the debate. Let's have a look at some of the comments of some of the opposition parties.
Honorable Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, we have an obligation as South Africa to defend our sovereignty and territorial integrity, and in doing so we should appreciate that our sovereignty as a nation should necessarily include the protection and sovereignty and the territorial integrity of all African countries. As we stated in the matter of urgent debate yesterday, South Africa should never surrender the Democratic Republic of Congo to the rebels, because these rebels are funded by foreign role players, including the foreign governments and businesses which use rebels as conduits and militia to loot our national endowments and wealth. If we run away and surrender DRC to the rebels, they will gain confidence and cause destabilization in the whole of East Africa, and then proceed to Southern Africa like they have already started in Mozambique.
The Labour Department enforcing labour laws on all companies, whether it is in the hospitality, construction, farming industries, would significantly reduce unemployment. The PIC must fund manufacturing-driven initiatives. There can never be economic growth and job creation in a consumerism-driven economy. There are factories all around the country, Mr. President. They are lying idle. There are people who are eager to work, and there's a market for the goods. Why are we importing goods that we can produce in South Africa? Mr. President, our communities cannot be defined by alcohol and drug abuse. We have young kids drinking their future away because they've got nothing to do. There must be a heavy investment in sports and arts infrastructure in the townships and villages. We cannot accept that a black child is more likely to be exposed to drugs and alcohol than schools and sports facilities in the townships. The alcohol culture is stealing our future, and the government must act. Enyobeni and countless incidents of alcohol underage drinking are great examples of this. The government must take unpopular decisions and save the future of this country rather than being popular in a country with no future. There must be harsh penalties on anything that kills our children, who are the future of the country. It is an embarrassment that our kids died of food poisoning, yet foreign spaza shop owners were just requested to register. Mr. President, spazas selling fake and expired foods will not be solved by registration. The solution lies in strict enforcement of immigration laws and mass employment of environmental health practitioners.
President Cyril Ramaphosa stood before a joint sitting of the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces on Thursday last week, addressing South Africans and the world to deliver his 8th State of the Nation address. Yet he spoke as if it were his first ever SONA. There was no sense of accountability, no meaningful reporting, and no acknowledgement of the economic crisis facing our people. The President did not tell us what happened to the National Development Plan. He did not say whether it is still the guiding policy of South Africa, nor did he acknowledge that the country has been governed without any clear, practical and guiding policy. Today, we have the medium-term development plan, but its direction and impact remain unclear, just another failed NDP. In reality, the neoliberal right-wing coalition has no credible economic plan. There is no clear strategy to create jobs while more than 12 million people remain unemployed. The economy is stagnant, and these are undeniable facts. We are facing a crisis as a nation. The crisis of high food prices, the crisis of unaffordable transport costs, the crisis of soaring petrol prices, the crisis of gender-based violence and femicide, and the collapse of the National Gender-Based Violence Command Center without an explanation.
It's time for South Africans to be South African and to honor and respect the preamble of the Constitution and the Constitution itself. This is no time for ethnic and cultural individuality, no time for racial polarization or talk of secession. We cannot afford a race war, and we cannot allow those who foment this here and abroad to incite us. You said we won't be bullied. Thereafter, President Trump issued an ill-informed executive order, fueled by divisive narratives designed to fracture us. This should have reminded us all that we do not live in splendid global isolation. The backpedaling in the face of Trump's executive order and the looming threat of AGOA's revocation has been remarkable. It reminds me of the popular acronym FAFO. Be careful of what you wish for. The truth is, for years we've been bullied. Our BRICS partners dictate who may and may not visit our country, such as the Dalai Lama, and who we can and cannot engage with, such as the Taiwanese government. You have chosen friends that are pariah nations, that are neither democratic nor uphold human rights, nations at war with their own people through repressive regimes. Conversely, we treat democratic nations, our major trading partners, with disdain and insult. Let it be known that the racist rhetoric so freely bandied about in this Parliament and on party rally stages by the likes of the ANC, the EFF and MKP has grave consequences for us as a nation.
It is these features that we must remind ourselves of in times such as this one, as we confront massive geopolitical threats. Mr. President, your injunction for us not to be bullied is an important one. I want to urge, Mr. President, there are times such as this one we must remind ourselves to remain united as a nation. When others at this moment, when another murder takes place both in the farm and in the streets, we must remain united. When others say to all of us that the demand for justice, as espoused in our Constitution, is put on the table, we must remain united. When ultimately, Mr. President, there are those who seek narrow interests and find voices from elsewhere, we must remain united. And ultimately, Mr. President, when the hopes of one become the fears of another race, Mr. President, let us build one South Africa, for we must remain united. Ultimately, Mr. President, I listened with great caution to your speech. It was filled with much promise. But, Mr. President, I think we need to use Thursday as an opportunity to move from state of the nation to state of performance. There's a biblical injunction that says this: that a house built on sand cannot stand. Our foundations are in trouble, Mr. President. In all reality, when you look at the MTSF that was tabled, 25% indicates the achievements of the last MTSF. Here, Mr. President, we can't pass at 30%. We need a better performance on the next MTSF. Mr. President, our economy has been growing at 1%, and social spending now consumes 60%. I want to urge that our debt is at 5.2 trillion rand, 74% of GDP. If we are going to show that we are serious, our foundations in building must remain strong.
Welcome back, and those were some of the views from the opposition party during the first day of the debate on the State of the Nation address. And also just to remind the viewers that this year will mark the 70th anniversary of the Freedom Charter, and we know it was adopted on the 26th of June in 1955, where there was a gathering in Kliptown, Soweto, of about 3,000 people, which was known as the Congress of the People, which was known as the Congress of the People. And also, just to remind you again that there was an interruption that was attempted there by the police at the time, and it was on the second day that they tried to interrupt the Freedom Charter, but they were late at the time because by then the charter had already been read in full.
And of course, like Thembinkosi said, those were some of the views that members had. And of course, you can let us know what your expectations are from the President's reply, especially on the back of what we just heard members talk about. Of course, we had the member of the MKP, Dr. John Hlophe, the leader of the opposition, and he spoke. He emphasized the importance of a sovereign country, and of course that is a huge reflection on Section 1 of the Constitution of the Republic that emphasizes the importance of a sovereign country.
And it was followed by Mr. Zungula of the African Transformation Movement, where he spoke a lot on labor-related issues, on unemployment, underdeveloped industries and infrastructure. He mentioned the factories that used to be in the former homelands that were there back in the day, but now as those factories have been destroyed, they are no longer there. And we know the amount of work that those factories used to provide for our people. You also spoke strongly on the alcohol culture in the country, especially amongst young children. You know, we've seen it, we see it all the time.
Yes.
It raised this as a serious concern that also includes drug abuse amongst the youth. And he also emphasized on the protection of the rights of children.
And spoke of the need and necessity to invest in sports and arts and culture infrastructure to ensure that children have something to do, extracurricular activities that they can do after school, because we find that children get involved in drug abuse. They are susceptible to the use of alcohol abuse as well, because they just have so much time on their hands. And of course, we also have to blame the kind of communities that we find our children in, because things such as alcohol abuse and drug abuse, they see it within our communities.
And Sebo, I remember how back in the day, you know, when I was growing up, we used to see the school fields after school. That would be, and even on over the weekends, even back in the rural areas, we used to have sporting events almost every weekend. We used to have competitions where we travel to the nearest cities to compete with children from the surrounding communities. But we don't hardly ever see that now, especially with the schools from the previously disadvantaged communities. But we also had President of the EFF, Mr. Julius Malema, also criticizing the president's speech, talking about lack of accountability in the speech, where he accuses the president of repeating what he's been saying for the past years that he's been delivering the State of the Nation, also focusing on the economic stagnation, the failure of the National Development Plan, and that even though the president has outlined that, has indicated that the MDTP, which is the Medium-Term Development Plan, has been adopted, he indicated that there was no hope for that document to yield any success. He also spoke on the high cost of living, as well as the failed intervention on the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide.
And of course, we had the action essays, Mr. Ethel Trollop. And I think the opening line for me, that it's time for South Africans to be South African, that was the highlight for me. Because I think ultimately with what's happening, especially in the diplomatic relations area, we realize that South Africa does not operate isolated. We're not isolated in the global spectrum. And so it was very important how he said that in talking about being united, in talking about ensuring that we're not bullied, that we're also not bullied by BRICS allies. We're also not bullied by the very parties that are within Parliament, and that we act on a united front and remember that ultimately we are South Africans and we should act accordingly.
And you also want, in particular, the African National Congress, the MK and the EFF, with some of the racist rhetorics that they're making, which of course, paint the country in a negative light because of the manner in which they'll be understood by the world outside of our country. We also had the leader of Build One South Africa, Mr. Mmusi Maimane. We know, we heard from yesterday how he has been preaching unity because his main emphasis has been about unifying the country in the face of these geopolitical threats, and also indicating how our country's sovereignty is under threat and how we need to do everything in our power to ensure that we protect its sovereignty.
Of course, Themicos, and these are all issues that touch on the core of socioeconomic issues as well. We're talking poverty, we're talking quality education, quality healthcare, and these are some of the things that the President will have to answer to today. And of course, the President is today going to reply to the debate on the State of the Nation address. And as you've just seen and discussed, opposition parties are calling for greater accountability, steadfast foreign policy, and proper action from government in addressing socioeconomic issues affecting the true state of the nation. Now let's hear from some of the GNU cabinet ministers who participated in the debate. Stay tuned.
Honorable President, I agree with you. Municipalities must work. Basic services must be delivered and delivered efficiently. At the heart of the crisis is the resources constraint of many municipalities. The current funding model for local government is unsustainable and perpetuates inequality between the rich and the poor. The new funding model is a must, one that considers each municipality's unique needs and challenges and provide a more equitable distribution of resources. Honorable President, you called for an updated white paper on local government. COGTA is already leading the reform of the 1998 white paper. Indeed, the White Paper Political Oversight Committee is already meeting next week. This presents an opportunity to rethink the funding model for municipalities.
Let me turn to serious business. Mr. President, we welcome your commitment to the founding principles contained in the Government of National Unity and the Statement of Intent to reduce poverty, reduce the cost of living, and address the indignity in which many of our people live. However, we must acknowledge that regardless of all the noise, both locally and internationally, South Africa has constitutional and moral obligations to transform society, to narrow inequality, and create a nation in which all citizens have a stake. Section 27 of our Constitution guarantees the right to access to basic needs, including healthcare, food, water, and social security. It also places the onus on the state to take reasonable steps to ensure that these rights are met. And already we have got the Grootboom Constitutional Court judgment to this effect.
The preamble of the Constitution determines that we respect those who worked to build and develop our country, and we believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. The ANC's Freedom Charter goes even further, saying, belongs to all who live in it, black and white. Now, Honourable Speaker, I want to put it very clearly that the Afrikaner is part of that diversity. And we want to build South Africa. And I want to put it very clearly that it is not true that expropriation without compensation will solve the land issue. What are the facts? If you go and look at the annual reports of the department, and if you look at the restitution, there were about 80,000 claims in terms of the restitution to address the unjust of the 1913 Land Acts. Of those claimants, 94%, and it's in the annual report, didn't want the land, they wanted the compensation. If we go to land redistribution, it is in the annual reports that 80% of the projects were failures. So to say that expropriation without compensation will solve the land issue and land reform is just not true.
South Africa is in a crisis. For 10 years, our population has grown faster than our economy, making us poorer. We have the highest unemployment rate on earth, and that has now been the case for decades. Violent crime still destroys the lives and livelihoods of our people at a terrible rate. 70 of our fellow countrymen and women are murdered every single day. Our education outcomes continue to steal our children's futures, and positive progress is slow. 8 months ago, the Democratic Alliance entered the government of national unity for 2 reasons. First, to prevent the MK from getting their hands back on the levers of power, where they would be able to loot another 4.9 trillion rand of our GDP and plunge our country into another 9 wasted years, where it wouldn't be the school children, it wouldn't be the poor that benefit, it would have been the same old elite that ate out of the trough of the public purse and have led our country to where it sits today.
I think the most consequential moment of our debate is when the leader of an organization that occupies the far right of the ideological spectrum of the political parties represented here in Parliament makes the following acknowledgement: that the Freedom Charter is indeed the seminal document that should guide the South Africa we want. And he goes further to make the point that it could be a foundational basis of our discussion in the mooted national dialogue. I want to further also acknowledge the most compelling and cogent explication of the achievements of the ANC as articulated by Honorable Dr. Hlophe, especially on key matrices in relation to social indicators. But he goes further to attempt to decouple the victories and the achievements of the ANC between the period 2009 to 2019 and apportion the victories to any individuals and the setback to an organization. I think this at best is a misrepresentation and at worst is duplicitous. And I want to say to Honorable Malema, in his predictable quest to discredit the SONA, he uses the NDP and the MTDP interchangeably. They are indeed interrelated but distinct. They are distinct in the following sense. The NDP's Vision 2030 has a long-time horizon. It is also outcomes-based, and it's also aspirational. The MTDP, on the other side, has got a 3-year cycle that is output-based and it also attracts significant resources, and also has got clear timelines and also clear targets, and embedded in that it is an overarching framework for monitoring and evaluation. So essentially what the Honorable Malema has done is to commit the cardinal sin from a conceptual outlook point of view.
And you're still watching Parliament TV right here on channel 408, DSTV channel 408. And of course, you can follow, like on all our social media platforms on X, TikTok, Facebook, and IG at Parliament of RSA. Now, as we build up to the President's reply, the big questions remain. How will he respond to the critics and demands from the MPs? Will he address their concerns head on? Will he provide further clarity on implementation? All these questions we will find out at 2 p.m. today. And of course, you can join the conversations and let us know what your expectations are on how the President will reply to some of the comments that we heard from the MPs. Of course, though, the comments that we just heard were from the cabinet ministers that participated in the debate and members of the cabinet who are directly responsible for delivering on the plans outlined in the State of the Nation address while they represent the interests of their constituencies. Teminkosi, it's quite a balancing act.
And all these views came from the cabinet ministers, who are part of the government of national unity. And we know that when the president spoke on Thursday last week, he was very concerned about the state of municipalities, the lack of technical skills and resources within those municipalities. And of course, we know that they are the ones that are closest to the people in terms of service delivery. So we heard that the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, and also an IFP leader, Mr. Velenkosi Hlabini, also speaking on the support for municipalities and the strengthening of local government, and also emphasizing the importance of the new local government funding model. We know that the President made some announcements when he delivered the State of the Nation address, and also making commitments on the department on updating of the white paper. And we also had the chairperson yesterday, the chairperson of the committee of Parliament, of the Portfolio Committee on Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, who shared with us some of the mechanisms and strategies that they're going to use to ensure that they hold the government to account, especially in relation to those commitments that were made by the President when he delivered the State of the Nation address.
And of course, we had the Minister of Tourism, Ms. Patricia de Lille, and she is the president of the Good Party. And she applauded how the address reflected the GNU statement of intent. And she said that it reflects on the important role that the state has in transforming society, and that it is crucial in terms of the constitutional mandate. And of course, she has survived throughout all the parliaments that have been established. And I think so far, since even last year, she has been the Minister of Tourism. And a lot of questions have been going on in terms of tourism, especially when it comes to the building of infrastructure and ensuring that heritage sites are maintained. Hopefully, the Portfolio Committee on Tourism will hold her to account in terms of that.
And safe to say that she's held very good relations with the leading party, which is the African National Congress. You know, he served in various positions of government, even though he was not from the African National Congress, but from the Good Party. And even during the time he was with the Independent Democrats, you know, before she became mayor of Cape Town and then returning to Parliament. But what I love the most and found it a little bit funny, like the Minister of Electricity has alluded to, was when the leader of the Freedom Front Plus, Dr. Groenewald, actually putting a stamp or final signature on the Freedom Charter, where he was, he started with recalling the preamble of the institution, which comes from the Freedom Charter. It says the South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white and united in diversity, and also highlighting how Afrikaners are also part of that diversity and calling for unity to end the racialization of the issue. So it was quite good to hear even the response from the Minister of Electricity, who just said how he was listening when the leader of the Freedom Front Plus was endorsing the Freedom Charter. And Also, just giving us a little bit of background information on the Land Act of 1913 and the restitution that followed, after we obtained our democracy. Also indicating that from the annual reports, there's about 80,000 claims that were made relating to unjust from the apartheid laws, the people losing their land and all that, but also raising a very serious concern that about 98% of those claims, people preferred money instead of being given the land back.
And of course, that's something that government will then have to navigate when they implement the Expropriation Act. And I think in terms of what Mr. Groenewald said, in terms of reiterating that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, and says that the Afrikaners are also part of that, I think it emphasizes and puts a stamp on the fact that they want to be here. And whatever it is that's happening in the US and the understanding of the US of what is happening in South Africa is incorrect.
And also it's about talking to that subject, what also we've been getting from the news, especially from comments from the Afrikaans-speaking community, who are saying, not on our name. You know, we can never pack and leave everything that we've worked so hard for here. We belong here. We have our ancestry here. So it would not just be a matter of packing and going to the United States. But I think when he was speaking to that Freedom Charter, he was emphasizing that Afrikaners are part of this nation, united, of course, in diversity.
And of course, you spoke earlier about Dr. José Nzura, and he's the Minister of Electricity, and he highlighted the FF Plus's agreement to the Freedom Charter, and that they share the same sentiments ultimately, and that ultimately South Africans should be South Africans. I think there is this golden thread throughout that there should be unity within South Africa as we face these issues of diplomatic relations.
Because all the speakers that took the podium, they criticized the president, but at the end of it all, they all emphasizing on the issue of unity, how we need to be united as South Africa. And I think, as you've rightfully said, also with all that is currently happening in the global world, we need to stand united and defend our country and its sovereignty. And also we had the leader of the Democratic Alliance, Mr. John Steenhuisen, just giving us some background on how South Africa's population has grown. But as the numbers are growing, we are actually declining economically. And he was and also stressing how that cannot be sustainable at all and is not good for the future of the country, because if we were growing in terms of population, we should also be seeing some economic growth as well.
And of course, that speaks to issues of infrastructure, speaks to the issue of the collaboration, lack of collaboration between the private sector and the public sector in ensuring that there's proper job creation, because with job creation comes economic development.
Well, we continue reflecting on the comments and views shared by members over the last 2 days of debate. Let's have a look at more remarks from the opposition benches during yesterday's debate.
Honourable Speaker of the National Assembly, Honourable Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Honourable Members of Parliament, fellow South Africans. We rise today on behalf of Mkhonto weSizwe Party, the official opposition in Parliament, to respond to Mr. Ramaphosa's 2025 failed state of the nothingness address, an address that regrettably felt less like a reflection of our nation state and more like a maiden speech of someone who's just been newly appointed to a job, laden with recycled promises, hollow rhetoric, and dressed in the usual fanfare that has become the hallmark of these kind of annual events. The SONA platform is not meant to be a ceremonial spectacle or a stage for lofty promises. It should be a moment of accountability where the nation hears an honest assessment of past commitments and concrete plans for the future. Instead, we witnessed yet another episode of political theatrics, a fashion show camouflaged with empty, hot air rhetoric. Mr. Ramaphosa's speech was filled with promises eerily similar to those made in 2024, 2023, and even earlier. Let us not be fooled by his eloquence. South Africans deserve more, Mr. President, than promises. They deserve results. We have listened to these commitments before, and yet the realities on the ground tell a different story. A story of betrayal, neglect, and failure. Now let's look at the military sacrifices. We mourn the loss of 14 South African soldiers, with this number still rising. These young men and women died not to defend our sovereignty, but to protect the government's economic interests in foreign lands. The least you could have done was to equip them better, yet you led your incompetent, less caring finance minister to keep defunding the military budget. Their blood is in the hands of the government that prioritizes profits over people. A failed state. Unemployment and poverty. The president speaks of economic growth and job creation, but the facts expose the truth. Whilst the population grows at the rate of 1.3 million people a year, the South Africa's unemployment rate remains the highest globally, sitting at 42%, with young people's unemployment exceeding 60%. Millions of our people, particularly the youth, are stuck in a cycle of poverty with no clear path out. The so-called inclusive growth has excluded majority, particularly black working class. Again, it's a failed state.
At the top of the list of priorities mentioned by President Ramaphosa during his SONA speech last week was economic growth. Unemployment in this country is way too high. For almost 30 years, we have seen unemployed people protesting, marching and toing in the streets, yet jobs remain elusive. The most painful thing for me to watch, Mr. President, is when our health workers, particularly medical doctors, toying with their stethoscopes hanging around their necks, protesting because they are demanding jobs that they studied for and are qualified for. South Africa has an abundance of talented, capable, unemployed doctors and nurses who are desperate for work. The ACDP would like to see our economy grow and absorb unemployed professionals who many of them are working as car guards because they don't have jobs. Since US President Donald Trump signed an executive order cancelling foreign aid to South Africa, there has been much speculation and questions as to whether or not AGOA is included. May I remind honorable members that AGOA is aimed at expanding American-African trade and investment by stimulating economic growth and assisting sub-Saharan Africa's integration into global economy. AGOA has and continues to have a positive impact on South Africa's economy, with our country being the leading African exporter of AGOA goods into the US market. If South Africa loses AGOA, we will lose our duty-free access to the US market, which would result in the introduction of tariffs. The consequence of this would be a reduction in the competitiveness of the South African automotive, agricultural, and footwear sectors in the US economy.
Commander-in-Chief of the EFF, South Africa is behind you, despite calls from the United States and Elon Musk, who are calling for your sanctions and calling you an international criminal. We want to remind you, President, that even Nelson Mandela was referred to as an international criminal, and only up until 2008 was he released from the terrorist list by the United States. Leaders like Gaddafi, Patrice Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah, Thomas Sankara from Burkina Faso were all labeled criminals by the West. Stand firm, President. Being a criminal of imperialist forces is a badge of honor for our struggle for the liberation of our people. President Ramaphosa, in the 20th century, Chairman Mao develops and popularizes a concept called a paper tiger. A paper tiger, President, is something that appears powerful and intimidating from a distance, but as you get closer to it, it's harmless, it's fragile, it's powerless. It's just a paper made of a tiger. Your State of the Nation address, President,
like the 7 you gave before that, reminds us of a paper tiger. You always make bold statements. You appear dangerous from afar, but when we pay closer attention, we see a paper tiger. Your ministers and premiers are all praise singers, Mr. President. All of them did not engage in the substance of your SONA. They did not defend your SONA. They were just looking for your applause and affirmation. Your chief whip comes and speaks about the National Development Plan. Yet former President Thabo Mbeki, who all of you like to quote, keeps telling you, Mr. President, the NDP is not a plan. Why? A plan requires clear steps, time frames, measurable objectives, and defined responsibilities at each and every level of government. Now, President, let me take you to Singapore. When Singapore gains independence in 1965, they implement the Economic Development Plan, focusing on industrialization, education, and infrastructure. This was not just talk, Mr. President. They created a strong manufacturing sector, which we don't have, upskilled their workforce, which you are not doing, and invested in technological innovation, transforming Singapore into one of the world's leading economies in a short space of time. This can't be said about the National Development Front.
House Chair, Mr. President, Mr. Deputy President, as long as we remain South Africans, we will remain divided, covered with copious amounts of makeup. Remove the makeup and nothing has changed. We're the only country that calls itself free, where we choose to go by our slave name. Rhodesia became Zimbabwe. Southwest Africa became Namibia. We remain South Africa. And I can tell you all, South Africa has not changed. If you're black like me, you're a second-rate citizen in South Africa. Until that changes, Mr. President, we're going nowhere. And I hope for leadership from you to give us a name. 3 quick things, Mr. President. GBV is a sport in this country driven by culture and traditions. Unless we change them, more of us will lose our children. We plead with you, Mr. President, let's have the discussion in our communities to change our values around that issue. As the minister will tell you in some of his presentations, our problem is not finance in health. We're spending enough of the GDP. What you should insist on, Mr. President, is until you realign what we spend on the GDP, not a cent more. NHI is another medical aid. The medical aid is under the authority of the minister. Let him change that. Our problem is not money. Lastly, on municipalities, our problem is not money. Our problem is cadre deployment. Our problem is leadership. See what Tshwane has done without an extra cent because of a mayor that says, I'm not a mayor of a party, I'm a mayor of the people of Tshwane. Let's put South African first and not money first.
Quite some strong views there coming from the opposition parties as the president is expected to take the podium for his reply to the State of the Nation address debate this afternoon at 2 p.m. Timikosi, I watched the debate over the past 2 days, and like we said, we've been analyzing that there's a golden thread, right? Everything is all about quality education, quality healthcare, ensuring that we combat unemployment, ensuring that there's economic development, ensuring that municipalities work. And just as the last speaker, it's not an issue with regards of resources, it's an issue of competence with the people that are serving the public.
And Tshepo, if you're talking about that competence, it takes me back to the President's commitments again on strengthening of the Public Service Commission. And I had an opportunity also to speak to the chairperson of the Public Service and Administration Committee, Portfolio Committee, Mr. Jan Notje de Villiers, who also spoke strongly on those matters of appointments that are happening within government and state-owned entities, and also indicating a much oversight that his committee is going to embark on to ensure that relevant people are appointed to relevant positions, because, as you rightfully say, there's been a number of speakers have raised the issue of not that we do not have we have the resources, but we don't have the right people, to deliver on the government's promises.
And of course, we had Ntlamulo Ndlela, who is from the MK party. And of course, he was criticizing the speech as a hollow rhetoric and empty promises, calling South Africa a failed state that has neglected its people. And I think from most of the opposition, that is what was said. Even when we did reactions on Thursday, the 6th of February, a lot of the members felt that this was just a repetition of hollow promises, of unfulfilled promises from past State of the Nation addresses that President Cyril Ramaphosa has delivered. Unfortunately, most of them also felt that this State of the Nation address should have been a checkbox of, we said that we'd do this, it has been done. We said we have done this, this is the progress. And instead, it was another rhetoric of promises and this is the plan and this is how we plan to do things still.
Rightfully so, Tsepa, we've heard from all the members of the opposition parties, especially those who are not in the government of national unity, so criticizing how government has handled the issue of unemployment, especially regarding the youth. So there seems to be real concern, especially within the members of parliament as a whole, about the youth unemployment, because if you have an unemployed youth then you cannot be confident to say that you have the future, because how is that unemployed youth going to take the country forward? But we heard also from the Reverend Kenneth Mush of the African Christian Democratic Party, also speaking strongly on issues of high unemployment, and also something that we saw not so long ago on our TV screen, where doctors were protesting with their stethoscopes. Is it stethoscopes?
Stethoscopes.
With their stethoscopes, and demanding for jobs. And we know that as things stand, we have students that are registering for medicine at university. We have those who are already either on their second, third to fourth years at university. And when we see doctors protesting over unemployment, then you begin to worry as to what is it that is going to happen to those who are still within the higher education
and
system.
The irony there is that when you go to public facilities, public health facilities, you're told that there is a need for doctors, and then you wonder, where's the shortfall? What's happening there? Why is it that there is a need for healthcare workers, for doctors in the public sector? However, you have students that who have graduated and are willing to work, but they're not being employed.
And what message is it being sent to those who are still studying? So he also highlighted the importance of the AGOA trade, agreement on South Africa's economy, and also warning that the loss of AGOA will affect our economy. So basically saying we need to find a solution, or we need to mend the relation between South Africa and the United States. South Africa is one of actually the main beneficiary of AGOA from the African continent.
Of course, then we had Honorable Lonzi of the EFF, and he called the president a paper tiger. He literally had a paper. I laughed when I saw it, because that reminds you of how robust debates can be in the House. And he criticized the president's hollow promises, again, with bold statements. And he says that the NDP is not a plan. He makes a comparison with the development of Singapore's economy and said that the reason why it is not a plan is because a plan consists of steps that will be taken. It consists of time frames. It consists of progress reports. And none of that has been provided by the president.
And I'm not sure about the name of a tiger, because I don't think I was hearing it for the first time, although it was used in a different context, that word being used amongst the politicians and sometimes even the cats. So there seemed to be this popularity of a feline amongst politicians.
Of course, we had Khosi Litlape as well from Action SA, and I think what stood out for me was the angle in which he suggested that the president must tackle the issue of gender-based violence. I think most of the time we just look at it as a community issue. We just look at it from an urban view, sort of, in terms of relationships of people that live together, families that live together where GBV happens. And this time, he urges the president to intervene by addressing culture and traditions that we have, and they shape how people think of GBV and how people view, especially women, how men view women in terms of the role that they have to play within households. That stood out for me.
And if you look back, or if you go back into history, he's right.
He's
we
correct.
need to have that distinction, especially in relation to culture and tradition and GBV.
Yes.
Because there were certain things that were raised. When we were raised, we knew that a woman's place is in the kitchen, for an example. So as we grow up, that is what we'll expect to see, that maybe there's so much GBV that is happening. We knew that boys were considered to be much stronger than women. There were certain duties for boys and there were certain duties for girls. But if you look at the situation now, sometimes you just don't understand, because we are now doing all the duties together. But just to take you back to the former president of the EFF Student Command, who spoke strongly on issues that are affecting the student, especially during this time of the year, and also inviting the president to take a drive through District 6. You know, and for those who are not familiar with Cape Town, District 6 is like a student village for the Cape Peninsula University of Technology students in the Cape Town campus. So that is where you'll always find students roaming and all that, because it's closer to their campus and also to their residences. So basically what we was saying, if you go there now, there's more roaming than students being in class or being in queues for registration and all that. And we do know and are aware of the NSFAS challenges that are confronting the student, and even just challenges that are confronting them, those ones that are in the missing middle.
Yes.
You know, so yeah, we hope that something really will be done in addressing issues of students, very close to my heart as well. So we will be probably having to invite the chairpersons of the higher education and basic education committees to come and talk to us at Parliament TV on what mechanisms are they going to use in order to address this challenge.
And quite honestly, and it's a personal view from my side, Temi, because I think it's ridiculous that it's been 10 years now since this Fees Must Fall movement, the hashtag Fees Must Fall movement, and till today, students are still facing the very same issues and challenges that they had 10 years ago.
So, a lot of critique and advice for the president coming from the opposition parties, but at the heart of the State of the Nation address and the debate is Parliament's role in making laws, approving budgets, and holding the executive accountable. MPs have raised serious concerns, but it's imperative that Parliament ensures follow through on the commitments made by the Government of National Unity. We are nearing 2 p.m. where the President is expected to reply to the debate on the State of the Nation address. But before that, let's have a look at the comments that came from the ANC during the debate.
Mine today is to say thank you. Thank you to you, President. It was exactly during this moment last year, President, that I humbly and politely requested you to sign the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill. Like a true listening president, here we are. You signed the bill, and the bill is in force. President, like a true listening president, you gave those that has limitations a period to give you alternative ideas. Because they don't have ideas, they chose to march instead of giving you ideas, and you went ahead to implement. President, by signing the bill, you don't know what you have done. You have finally opened the doors of learning and culture to our children. And for that, we want to say thank you, President. President, They threatened you with legal action, but to date, dololo, because you can't take non-racialism to court and you can't take non-racialism to jail. President, it was during the last State of the Nation address when you boldly declared that whether you are young or old, whether you live in a rural area or a township, whether you are employed or unemployed, whether one is a security guard, petrol attendant, or a domestic worker, or an executive of a company, when you fall sick in our country, you are entitled to quality health care. Within that context, President, you went to sign the National Health Insurance Bill, and we want to say, Siyabulela, President. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Again, you are threatened with legal action, but to date, dololo, because no one can challenge equity and no one can challenge access to quality health care for everyone. President, we also want to thank you. As the Gauteng government, we introduced a program called Ikageleng, Build for Yourself. Through this program, President, we offer land to those that are poor and homeless. We as government, we just install roads, sewer, water and electricity. People, depending on their pockets, build their own houses so that you don't have one-dimensional way of providing houses to our people. This program to date has benefited close to 15,000 people who are security guards, who are nurses, who are policemen, who can afford to be excluded in the housing program. And for this, President, we want to say thank you. Siyabonga.
Honorable President, this year marks the 70th anniversary of the Freedom Charter. Only through its full implementation can we claim to have lived up to the ideals of a free, non-racial, non-sexist, and prosperous society. The 1994 democratic breakthrough was the realization of the call that the people shall govern. 30 years later, our generational mission is to realize the clause that says the people shall share in the country's wealth. We are still struggling to correct the historic injustice of apartheid with the persistent challenges of poverty, inequality, unemployment, and historic economic exclusion. The South African economy was built on the back of mining, energy, and agriculture. It relied on the super exploitation of black migrant workers and black women whose job was to reproduce children as future laborers and take care of dying men who could no longer work. It is treasonous that some beneficiaries of this crime against humanity have been calling on foreign states to intervene to block even the moderate reforms our government seeks to implement. We must enable our mining industry, which the ANC sees as a sunrise industry, to flourish and not leave anyone behind. To ensure that mining flourishes, the Council for Geoscience surveyed the country and found significant mineral resources yet to be exploited. It is a pity that some honorable members, even those in the GNU, have no experience in building an inclusive economy that works for all. One political party is stuck in state capture, another one in a vault in VBS in Venda, another in 1948, daydreaming about being called Bas again. We must ensure that the next gold belt, which could be bigger than the original one on the reef, is mined to benefit all sections of South African population. Our national endowments must fund the NHI and the reforms in the education sector called for by the Bella Act.
House Chairperson, in the SONA debate, our point of departure must be the preamble of our Constitution, wherein Parliament, through its elected representatives, adopted a supreme law of the Republic, which is to build a united democratic South Africa, which is able to take its rightful space as a sovereign state in the family of nations. And I want to underline the sovereign state in the family of nations. Our self-determination is a right politically and economically, and we shall protect it and conduct our relations and trade with other countries only based on peace and friendship. South Africa's development intrinsically depends on inclusive economic development and job creation. This means implementing an industrial strategy and policies that ensure the reindustrialization of the country through beneficiation, local industrialization, and through economic development. We are encouraged by your commitment, Honorable President, to finalize a modernized and comprehensive industrial policy that drives economic growth. However, implementation depends on removing economic constraints caused by unreliable electricity and water supply, as well as logistical constraints. This means our point of departure for inclusive economic development and job creation is infrastructure development. We also have to ensure that regulated prices for utilities and logistics are reviewed to ensure that our economy becomes cost competitive for investment and that vestiges of structural inflation are removed from the economy to attract investment in competitive global market. Mr. President, you have accurately articulated our developmental priorities as expressed in the medium-term development plan. In the main, our priority is job creation and inclusive economic growth through beneficiation and a manufacturing-driven industrial process. The backbone of economic growth pathways lies in intensifying the manufacturing output and boosting exporting growth. Beneficiation by local industries will increase value addition of our natural resources, which remains our valuable competitive advantage. This requires proper planning and efficient inputs in the economy. Further, we must reposition our state-owned enterprises as engines of rapid inclusive economic development. As SOEs operate in 30% of the economy, which is no small part of the economy, there is a need to recognize the progress made in stabilizing the SOEs in the sixth administration, as many of them in the minerals and transport sector have recovered and are going concerns. We need to drive those on an investment path in infrastructural development while we ensure that other critical SOEs recover fully from state capture. Others such as PRASA and ESCOM are recovering well with much more work to be done.
In the article titled, "The Whistle's Politics," the new pitch of an old narrative as meaning, I quote, "an overt intentional speech or act that is designed with intent to allow two plausible interpretations with the sole intention of peddling information." Lies and half-truths in such a way that the audience is unaware of the existence of the second and coded interpretation. Professor Jennifer Saul from the University of Waterloo, in a seminar titled "Political Manipulation and Philosophy of Language," also cautions us to be aware that those who resort to whistling often covertly and intentionally seek to divert attention or distort the true state of affairs through witch hunt distortion that is intended to pursue narrow political gains. Honorable President, through you, House Chair, the history of literal and metaphorical whistling gives us crucial insight into some of the speeches that have been made on this podium since yesterday. They were, to a larger degree, less substantive, less meaningful, but deliberate manipulation of facts to divert attention from the real issues that the President has presented to the nation last week.
Honorable House Chair, we welcome the undertaking made by the President of our country to address youth unemployment. As IFP, we welcome that the regulations of the Public Procurement Act, which will be fast-tracked to ensure that businesses owned by young people will receive equitable opportunities in government contracts. We hope that this procurement will be followed by a clear draft policy document and clear legislative provisions and guidelines in existing procurement legislative framework. We hope that those in charge of managing state procurement processes will seek to show commitment to the youth of this country. As IFP, we believe that to rebuild South Africa, we need to invest in our youth. Honorable House Chair, we welcome all the declarations in relation to gender-based violence, which the Honorable President has considered a pandemic. However, the medium-term budget policy statement, which the Honorable President oversees, remains silent on funding of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. As IFP, we believe that this must be addressed as it is a national concern, and we further call for the financing of the women's rights agenda. Honorable President, in your State of the Nation address, you rightfully acknowledged the severe dysfunction in many municipalities, citing poor service delivery, decaying infrastructure, and financial mismanagement. Your promise to ring-fence utilities for water and electricity services could not come at a more critical time. We appreciate your follow-up to the commitment you made during the opening of Parliament address last year of visiting eThekwini. However, there is still no improvement in service delivery. Residents across the city are still faced with constant water outages with no resolution in sight. The Metro continues to be unresponsive to calls made by residents for water services, especially when water leaks are reported, resulting in millions of liters of water flowing down our streets, and yet we say we are a water-scarce country. We welcome the 940 billion rand investment in infrastructure over 3 years. It is encouraging to see the importance placed on public-private partnerships to fund these projects. We therefore call for stringent performance matrix, monitoring, accountability, and transparency over this investment. We support the review of the funding model for municipalities that the Honorable Slabisa is leading in the reforms of the 1998 White Paper for having established the White Paper Political Oversight Committee, which seeks to make local government work better.
You're still watching Parliament TV, and we are a few minutes away from crossing to the chamber for the President's reply to the State of the Nation Address debate. We just saw clips from ANC members and one IFP member during the debate, and not surprisingly, many of them applauding the speech, but also expanding on how the plan delivered by the President will impact the lives of ordinary South Africans. Temingwesi, I don't know. I think like throughout with all the SONAs, you'll obviously get two sides of the coin, where you get members that feel that the President should have done more. We feel that there's been too many unfulfilled promises. And then, of course, you get the other side of the coin, where, for example, we had one member during reactions who said this President's speech was a masterpiece. It is a reflection of what government wants to do, what government plans to do, and what government is doing.
And then you will get members such as the leader of the African Transformation Movement, Uvuyo Zungula, who would say this is a copy and paste of your first State of the Nation address. But having listened to those debates now from some of those ANC members, starting with the Gauteng of the Premier of Gauteng and the former MEC for Education, and also speaking to the Bella Bill, we do know that Mr. Panyaza Lusuf is very close to the education sector,
Yes.
and safe to say he's also served very well there when he was an MEC for education in Gauteng. So we would have expected him to make some comments from the Bella Act. Do know that he's also one of the leaders within the ANC that had been pushing for the president to sign the Bella bill into law, which eventually happened. And he seemed to have been very happy that eventually happened. And he also commended the president for being a listening president, and also how this Bella Act will impact on the educational landscape in South Africa.
And of course, we had one of the chairpersons of the portfolio committees, Mr. Mika Mahlaule, and he commended the president for reinforcing the values of the Freedom Charter, raising the importance of sharing the wealth, and highlighting the mining sector as an industry that can deliver on this objective. Of course, that coincides with his portfolio because it deals with mining, it deals with minerals. And we've also had a conversation here with him on Parliament TV with regards to illegal mining and some of the measures that the department and government as a whole should take to ensure that we combat illegal mining and that there's proper efficiency and equality within the mining sector.
And Saba, we've had so many referrals to the Freedom Charter during this the State of the Nation and the debate that took place over there today. And I'm sure we can expect even to hear the president when he replies at 2 o'clock also just making reference to the Freedom Charter. And it's funny how this document that was adopted over 70 years ago, it's still relevant today. But the question that maybe we should be asking some of the people that we invite for the interviews, is that document being implemented to its fullest? Because from the manner in which it's still relevant today, we need to know, we need that update to how far, clause by clause, how far are we in terms of implementation of the Freedom Charter, even if we start counting from 1994, because obviously prior to that, we would not have had time to implement some of the commitments that were put into that Freedom Charter.
And of course, we had Honorable Lekwase, who linked the importance of our sovereignty to developmental goals. Of course, this touches on what Dr. John Hlophe also said when he reiterated the importance of a sovereign country. She further highlighted the importance of economic growth, applauded the money allocating in terms of infrastructure development and SOEs. Of course, SOEs are much interlinked to maladministration, like we know, corruption, as we know. And as always, we always ask, is there enough consequence management? Are the people that are in these positions to serve the public, are they competent enough to do the job?
And you know the challenges, there's a number of challenges that are confronting the state-owned entities. You know, we have your South African post office, where as things stand, we don't know what the future holds for it. You have your PRASA, you have your many other
you have your SAAs, you have your ESCOMs that are always being, they need money injections all the time. However, nothing ever really improves.
Now when I heard Ms. Lekwase like applauding these allocations to the SOEs, I was like, yes, we need to applaud, but are we seeing value for the money?
Yes.
You know, is there value for the money that we put into these entities? Because every now and again, you hear of bailouts over and over again. We know that SAA has been bailed out several times. SABC has been bailed out. The post office and things there. And I know that they had asked for another bailout, but unfortunately the the Minister of Finance didn't budge. And as such, they are making some shifts within monies that were also allocated for very important projects within the department. One of those being the SA Connect, that seeks to connect, to provide universal services to our people, especially those in the previously disadvantaged communities. Now to hear that monies are being shifted from that program to assist the post office or a state-owned entity, you know, so we, like I said, that we have a lot of work to do also here at Parliament TV to ensure that we hold those chairpersons accountable, because the president has made commitments. Yes, there are committees of Parliament that will sit in, but as Parliament TV, we also have that oversight role over especially the members of Parliament. Yes.
And we had the Chief Whip of the Council, Ndate Kenneth Muimang, and he criticized the debates of the opposition and how they don't contribute to taking the country forward. Of course, members had different views in terms of that, because I think also members of Parliament also take their role very seriously, because their role is to perform oversight, to hold the executive to account, and to ensure that there is proper public participation. And the way they're approaching the president's speech is exactly that way, holding him to account, giving those concerns, and even giving suggestions, and obviously telling him that, look, this is what you've promised so far. How is that? What's the progress there? And give us a report on that instead of giving more promises on things that you've promised before.
And what other parliament in Africa can hold the members of executive to account, such as the national, our South African parliament? I think we're doing very well in terms of holding the members of the executive to account. And as you rightfully put it, Seppo, I don't think we'll be holding the members of the executive to account if we have members of parliament that are all going to just stand there and agree with everything that has been said, agree with all the policies that have been put into place. So I think that we're doing quite well in terms of holding the executive to account. Our parliament is a vibrant parliament, is an open parliament where people have a right to exercise all the freedom of speech that they can. And we also had, like the last speaker, Mr. Les Governor, the Deputy Chairperson in the National Council of Provinces, also speaking on youth unemployment, emphasizing the importance of ensuring or of addressing the issue of youth unemployment. It is a national crisis because, as I had said, that the youth is the future of this country, and you have an unemployed future. What kind of future are you going to have?
Of course, Temikosi, just to go over for viewers, these are some of the issues that members have raised. Concerns about government's economic plan and economic growth within the country, a progress report on the National Development Plan, service delivery and concerns of municipal levels, capacitating municipalities and recruiting competent public servants to ensure efficient and effective service delivery, quality education, quality healthcare, ensuring that there's proper NSFAS for students and institutions of higher education, the administration thereof, levels of crime, gender-based violence, equality, GBV, and considerate police stations in terms of sexual offences convictions. Of course, we can see members making their way into the chamber. Of course, the bells are ringing. It is a joint sitting of both the National Assembly members and National Council of Provinces, where the President is scheduled to reply to the State of the Nation address.
And Seppo have rightfully said the members have now entered the chamber. The President will now reply to the debate on the State of the Nation address as we now cross over to the chamber. I'm told that the members are still settling in the chamber, but and are still walking in. So we will be taking you to the chamber as soon as
and of course now you can stay tuned to Parliament TV. The chamber, the proceedings have begun, and let's see what the President has to say. Stay tuned.
Take our seats.
By the President on the debate on the State of the Nation address.
Order, honorable members, can we please take our seats? I will now call upon the Honorable President to reply to the debate. Order, honorable members.
Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Toko Didiza, Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Ms. Refilwe Ntweni-Tsipane, Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, the premiers of our various provinces here present, ministers and deputy ministers, representatives of SALGA, honorable members. Speaker and Chairperson, I wish to thank the honorable members for their contributions to the debate on the state of the nation. I welcome in particular those contributions that sought to enrich our common understanding of the work that we need to do to drive more rapid and inclusive growth, to create employment, and to bring an end to poverty. I recognize those speakers and thank them for their valuable contributions. I would that when we debate the state of the nation, we should, yes, be critical, as we should as members of this august body that represents our people, but also bring forward good suggestions and proposals that will be able to take our mission forward. Some speakers held firm to the denialism and distortions demanded by their party positions. This debate illustrated the dangers of retreating to corners, isolating ourselves in ideological, cultural, racial, and linguistic enclaves, and hardly ever engaging beyond our immediate circles. This is not conducive to nation building in a situation like ours at this point in time, where diverse people live side by side in our beautiful country. This is what makes the forthcoming national dialogue so important. South Africans, informed by their different lived experiences, can discuss the many challenges facing our nation and develop common solutions. And this is what I would have wanted to see coming out of this debate. As South Africans, we have sat around the negotiating table and forged agreements under much more trying and fraught circumstances. The journey we are embarking upon now through the national dialogue will result in concrete processes to become a more united and stronger South Africa in the face of many political, social, and economic challenges that we face both globally and locally. The debate also saw the expression of divergent views on various matters, also by parties that make up the government of national unities, and sometimes these views were expressed quite robustly and at times quite directly and harshly. It is expected that the 10 political parties that make up the government of national unity, with their very different perspectives and ideological views, will not always agree and will sometimes feel the need on platforms such as this to talk to their different constituencies. Now, despite these differences, these political parties are working well together in the government of national unity, whether people like it or not. We are finding ways of mediating our differences, and we remain focused on the actions that we are all committed to undertake. It is this that gives me confidence that the government of national unity that I lead will continue to promote stability and serve the interests of South Africa in accordance with the statement of intent that we all signed up to and the medium-term development plan. It is encouraging that a great many of the contributions in the debate also appreciated the progress that we have made as a country over the last 30 years. And those who may well have been tempted to say vacuous things such as no progress has been made, nothing has been done, they knew down deep in their hearts that they are talking to the wind. This progress is owned by the people of South Africa, and let me be clear, it is not owned by any individual. Even the great Nelson Mandela, the father of our democracy and nation, never for 1 minute claimed that he had freed the people of South Africa. And even as people might have tried to lionize him, he always said, we did it together as the people of South Africa. And that is what we should do. This South Africa has been built by its own people who have sought to change their own lives. They have entrusted the stewardship of this process to all of us, not just to some of us or to one of us. Many of the speakers in the debate acknowledged the real challenges we face today and recognized the work that is underway to address these challenges. They said that the nation that we want to build must be fundamentally different from the country that we once were. Even those who may well have been opposed to the foundational document of our Constitution, the Freedom Charter, now pleasingly today embrace it, and they talk to it as well and quote it. That shows the growing political maturity in our country, that we are embracing the change that our forebears dreamt of 70 years ago. We are the first to acknowledge that we have not yet achieved a number of the aspirations set out in the Freedom Charter, but it is dishonest to say that no significant progress has been made. A number of the speakers during this debate spoke about the land question, which I have in the past characterized as the original sin that was committed against the people of our country. Describing the Natives Land Act of 1913, Solomon Plaatje described the Natives Land Act as an insidious law that rendered black people pariahs in their own birth, in the land of their own birth. It is this Native Land Act that plunged millions of South Africans into poverty and deprivation, whose impact endures right to this day. Despite the terrible deed that was perpetrated against black South Africans here in the city of Cape Town, along the foothills of Table Mountain, there lies a potent symbol of hope change and progress. Just a few kilometers up the hill from our parliament is District 6. It is here that one of the most painful chapters in the history of this country took place nearly 60 years ago. In 1968, the apartheid regime began demolishing District 6 to make way for a whites-only suburb. More than 60,000 people were forcibly removed. Families were torn apart. An entire community and way of life was destroyed. Over the course of 2 decades, the apartheid government forcibly removed more than 3.5 million people in District 6, Sophiatown, Marabastad, Katomena, Kroonstad, Nelspruit, and many other places across the country. It was one of the largest mass removals of a people in modern history. There are some in this house today who have memories of their families being forcibly removed from their land. There are millions more across the country who still experience the after effects of this monstrous crime. The people of this country know the pain of forced removal. That is why we will never allow forced removals again in this country. And that is why we have a constitution that prohibits the arbitrary deprivation of property. That is why we have a constitution that requires just and equitable compensation to be paid in the event of expropriation for a public purpose in the public interest where applicable. Our experience of forced removals also explains the constitutional requirement that the state must take reasonable measures within its available resources to foster conditions in which it will enable citizens to gain access to land and to do so on an equitable basis. Today, District 6 rings with the sounds of families who have been returned and who are returning to the land that was taken from them. Yet, like the transformation of our society, the process of restitution is not complete. It is an ongoing process. There is still much that needs to be done to heal the divisions of the past. I reflect on this, honorable members, because it is part of our history, not only because issues of land and redress have featured prominently in this debate, but also because understanding this past that many would like to forget is vital to understanding the nation that we are working to build today. At this important moment in our country and in our world, we must ask ourselves what kind of nation we want to be. Surely we do not want a nation which is separated by race, language, income, and geography. We want a nation in which all people enjoy equal worth and equal opportunity. We want a nation in which the rule of law is protected and upheld. We want a dynamic and growing economy in which small businesses can emerge, grow, and expand. It is my firm and enduring belief that all of us as South Africans, as fellow citizens of this beautiful country, are bound together by our history and our present, and we want the same thing for all the people of this country. We have toiled long and hard to build a nation united in its diversity. We are firmly committed to the fundamental principle that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. We are firmly committed to a society that is non-racial and non-sexist. We want to live together in peace, harmony, and equality. We do want to see our country succeed and growing. We must not allow others to define us, but more importantly, to divide us. At a time like this, we need to stand united as a nation, particularly now when we are facing a harsh global wind. This is not the time for any of us to rush off to foreign lands to lay complaints about issues that we ourselves can solve here in this country. We need South African solutions for South African problems. While there are many diverse and different voices in our country, we must strive to convey a common message. We must say to our people and to the world that we are committed to work together to build a society in which all South Africans are free and equal, to build a nation that works for all. And together we should be better at being weavers. We should be better at being builders, to build a nation working along each other. That is what the program of the Government of National Unity is all about. And we will not be diverted from the path that we have set out. And I'd like to repeat, we will also not be bullied by anyone in the country or outside from our intent to work together. As a country, this is a moment of continuity and change, but it is also a moment of unity. Faced with the challenges that we now face even globally and continentally, this is the time when we must unite and speak as one and act as one as a nation. It is a moment of continuity because we are building on the substantial advances that have been made over 30 years of democracy. And we are taking forward the far-reaching reforms that we embarked on in the previous administration. While some speakers have sought to claim the progress that is being made and the reforms that are now being implemented as new developments and their own makings, we nevertheless welcome the fact that they also embrace these initiatives and are working to ensure that they succeed. Whether they claim to be the mothers or the fathers of this, we are working and moving forward. The structural reforms and changes initiated under Operation Vulindlela are well underway, led by the presidency, and are being executed through the intergovernmental cooperation together with National Treasury. We will move with even greater urgency and determination to ensure that these changes, these reforms, these advances forward are implemented. And working with our partners, they being labor, business, and community-based organizations, we are making considerable progress towards resolving challenges in our ports and rail, and in laying the ground for an energy-secure future. We are introducing competition and dynamism. These reforms are not incidental. They are key to improving the business operating environment, to attracting new investment, and to creating jobs. This is also a time of change. Not only has the composition of our government changed, but there is a clear commitment to accelerate growth and transformation and to also shift the trajectory of our economy. There is a determination to be innovative, to be creative, to come up with new solutions to problems and challenges, to expand programs that work and programs that have an impact, and also to end those and redirect those programs that do not work. As we do so, we are building on the work that has been done in previous years and not discarding it. There has been much debate about the laws that were passed in the previous Parliament and the policy and legislative agenda of this administration. It is important to understand the powers and responsibilities of the President when it comes to assenting to legislation passed by Parliament. Now, we should be proud of our legislative architecture and process, which subjects every draft bill to several layers of debate, consideration, scrutiny, as well as public consultation. This process draws on the views of experts, the collective wisdom of members of Parliament, and let me repeat, the collective wisdom of members of Parliament. Now, here is the reservoir of wisdom. Some may think that one side is wiser than the other, but when I look at all of you, I say, you are wise men and wise women. Act like that as well. We should be proud that we are a democracy that is governed by a thorough process of approving our laws and not the arbitrary whims of a ruler. The Constitution is very clear. The President must assent to a bill passed by Parliament unless the President has reservations about its constitutionality. The Constitution does not permit that the act of assent by the President be subjected to negotiation or to the terms of an agreement between parties. Now, the President must ultimately make a determination in line with the Constitution. As we said in the State of the Nation, and as many speakers have emphasized in this debate, what we want above all is an economy that is growing, inclusive, as well as being sustainable. We will work with all willing partners, and we will mobilize whatever human, financial, and other resources that are necessary to achieve that objective. And we will do detailed work, and we will also do the heavy lifting. We will also harness our country's considerable competitive advantages to drive growth and job creation. Last year, the World Economic Forum ranked South Africa as the leading tourism destination on the continent, citing factors such as our business environment, information technology, and tourism infrastructure and services. And sometimes we downplay all these endowments. We are attracting new visitors to our shores and improving our visa regime, as we heard. Beyond South Africa's natural splendor and endowments, we have a vast and highly diversified agricultural sector that is a substantial contributor, yes, to our country's GDP and rising. Farmers, both black and white, are the lifeblood of our economy as they feed the nation. Supporting the growth of agriculture is key to our goal of inclusive growth and to creating jobs in every part of our country. We are resolving the challenges in our logistics system that have constrained the growth of the sector, and we are expanding markets for South Africa's various products, agricultural, manufactured and otherwise, as well as abundant natural resources, yes, in our mining industry, and indeed many others, South Africa has advanced manufacturing capacity. We have skills, we have experience and know-how that we need to harness, not only to develop existing industries, but also to establish new industries. That is how a number of other countries are growing. This is the heart of our industrial policy. It is a part of our just transition to a low-carbon economy and to a climate-resilient society as well. We will put these capabilities to work to build industries in such areas such as green hydrogen, electric vehicles, and renewable energy. We have great endowments in this regard. We will seize the opportunities to rapidly change in new technology as well, to build a digital economy and a digital state and a digital society. I've often said that when it comes to digitization, our people are far ahead of us, and we need to follow in their toe to ensure that as a government, we give them those enablers and capabilities that they desire. The industrialization drive is underpinned by a significant new investment in infrastructure. We spoke about the various commitments and investments that we are making. The infrastructure drive is gaining momentum, and thanks to innovations such as Infrastructure South Africa and the Infrastructure Fund, and also thanks to the manner in which we are now beginning to find new ways of funding infrastructure. These efforts will also be accelerated as a result of the changes introduced by National Treasury to encourage greater public-private partnerships in infrastructure. Even as we do so, it is worth pointing out that public sector infrastructure investment is on the rise for a second consecutive year. As we were reminded in the debate, the focus on new infrastructure development must be accompanied by the maintenance and upgrading of existing infrastructure. As we develop infrastructure alongside that, we must begin to put together budgets to maintain those infrastructure facilities that we build. Strengthening provincial and local economies is critical for inclusion in terms of the economy. Through the district development model, we are working to strengthen local economic development so that our municipalities should become the centers of economic growth and development and be well placed to play an important role in economic growth as well as to provide services to our people. Now, during this debate, we have heard from the premiers of our various provinces who were here present about the vital work underway in various provinces to stimulate provincial economic activity, to attract higher levels of investment and create jobs. Just listening to the work that is being done in the provinces gave me a clear impression that indeed our country is on the move on a number of fronts, and I want to applaud our premiers for the work that they are doing. We have said that infrastructure development is indeed the flywheel of economic activity, and we are witnessing these multiplier effects on provincial GDP, local businesses and communities. We welcome the massive infrastructure investment in several provinces, covering projects such as roads, housing, bulk water systems, and other infrastructure. Not only will these projects vastly improve the delivery of basic services, but they are also going to support economic growth and job creation in those provinces. The visits by the National Executive, that is Cabinet, to our various provinces have shown great benefit and opportunities for synergy. We have been able to share best practice and also to give support to our provinces on a number of issues that they are dealing with. Leveraging of public-private partnerships for infrastructure build in all provinces is proving to be highly effective in terms of pooling resources, sharing expertise, and delivering mass infrastructure at scale. It was a joy to hear how provinces themselves are beginning to cooperate to also build massive infrastructure facilities, where one province and the other meet to say, let us build either this road, let us build together this train or whatever, and do so in a cooperative manner. We are seeing high impact financial inflows into our provinces in mining, in renewable energy, in auto manufacturing, in agriculture, in manufacturing as well, tourism and other key sectors. This is a demonstration of ongoing confidence of domestic and international investors in these centers of economic activity. When our provinces hold their own investment conferences or summits, I know for sure that they are able, through those efforts, to attract investors, both local and international, who make commitments that are advancing the prospects of economic growth in those provinces. So our provinces, our provincial leaders, premiers, and MECs are really becoming effective. And once again, I applaud them for the wonderful work that they are doing. For investment to grow, there must be a razor-sharp focus on improving the capacity of local government so that local government can deliver essential services that are critical to business activity, be they water, electricity, or local logistical infrastructure. Strong municipalities are needed to achieve strong local economies. We welcome the commitment of our premiers to prioritize municipal governance and capacity building, and to support the financial sustainability of the municipalities in their provinces. Clean water, proper sanitation, reliable electricity, effective waste management, and well-maintained municipal infrastructure isn't just good for communities, it is also good for business. But it is also good so that our municipalities must get good revenue. It reassures potential investors that are exploring investment opportunities in provinces. We welcome the initiative taken by many of these provinces to hold local investment conferences, as I said. We call on our respective premiers to direct the same focus and energy towards local development of townships, small towns, and village economies as well. We have seen, for example, how the potential of rural and ecotourism has been effectively harnessed by several provinces to support job creation, poverty eradication, and small business development and community ownership of tourism resources and facilities. And it is this way of involving our people through various entities, be they traditional leaders, community-based organizations, co-ops, that we will be able to make greater progress. By leveraging their respective competitive economic advantages, our provinces are perfectly positioned to power growth, turning every metro, every city, every town and every village into a hive of economic activity. The national government will stand in support of the various efforts that our provinces will make in this direction. Now, as several speakers said, we need to continue working with our traditional leaders as they continue to play an important role in development. We are seeing an improvement in the growing cooperation between our traditional leaders and local councils. We want to see more integration and more collaboration between our traditional leaders and our local government entities. A number of members spoke about the importance of education as a great instrument of transformation. We welcome the suggestions and the proposals that were put forward during this debate. Education is at the heart of inclusive growth, job creation, and social upliftment. The World Bank recently released a report on South Africa's economic performance and prospects for the medium term. The report highlighted the role of education in strengthening our country's human capital in pursuit of economic and social development. Democratic South Africa inherited a legacy of Bantu education, as we all know, and we have been steadily working to transform the education landscape and to provide decent, quality, basic education for all. And we are working to build an education system that produces the skills that are needed by the economy. And this means, among other things, that our children must have a strong literacy and numeracy base from the earliest years. And that is why we have laid so much emphasis on early childhood development to improve the learning outcomes of our children in the foundational phase. We concur with the sentiments that were expressed during this debate that technical and vocational training must be strengthened if we are to develop the skills pipeline that are needed for the vast majority of our people in a changing world of work. And we are committed to the development of entrepreneurship as a pathway of employment. We must work to dispel the mindset that self-employment is only a route for those who cannot be absorbed by the formal economy. That is an important thing that we should also focus on. Compared with the rest of the continent, we must admit that our country's rate of entrepreneurship is at a rather low level, and this must change. A thriving and small business and cooperative sector is a key to inclusive economic growth. We welcome the ongoing efforts of the Department of Small Business Development to develop township and rural economies and enterprises, and to have the goal of creating a good number of new, medium, small enterprises by 2030. We want a society that takes care of those in need. If we drive economic growth and the creation of jobs, we are strengthening the social protection that is provided to poor and the unemployed in our country. Now, despite severe financial constraints, we continue to implement pro-poor policies to uplift society's most vulnerable, yes, in the form of social grants, school feeding schemes, and the free basic services for the poor. This is not just about tackling poverty and improving the quality of life of South Africans. It is about reducing inequality. It is about giving every person a fair chance. it is also about investing in our people and enabling them to realize their own potential. What has also been clear in this debate is that we all want a country that is transformed and that has shared the heavy burden of its past. There is broad consensus across, I would say, the political spectrum, and indeed across society, on the principle of non-racialism. Our empowerment and transformation programs recognize that to build a truly non-racial society, we must narrow inequality and redress the harmful legacy of apartheid. And that is why we remain committed to the programs that will enhance transformation. Whether people like it or not, that is the route we have to take. We will not relent in our drive to expand the participation of black and young South Africans in various sectors of our economy. We will ensure that the Transformation Fund that a number of people spoke about, some critically and some in favor, that this fund achieves its objective of providing financial and non-financial support to black-owned enterprises to ensure their meaningful participation in the economy. If we want transformation, this is one of the key routes that we must take. And I would say to those who are opposed to it, to sit back and think it through and ask themselves, how else are we going to foster transformation if the government is not going to take deliberate steps to make sure that we deal with the legacy of the past? You know, for instance, sometimes people say, yes, you have restituted land to people, but the land that you have restituted has gone fallow. It's not being utilized. And then they say, that is so because you never gave assistance, financial support or otherwise. And when we want to set up a transformation fund, the very same people are the ones who are against it. How is that possible? We must be serious about transformation and advancing the interests of those who were adversely affected by apartheid. Now, these policies are about eradicating the differences that still exist in our society, not entrenching them. They are about empowering those who were disempowered deliberately, and also protecting the rights of all. Later today, we will gather at Air Force Base Swartkop in Pretoria to receive the remains of 14 South African soldiers who lost their lives in the Eastern DRC. We will pay tribute to our fallen soldiers and honor their contribution to the struggle for peace on the African continent. Much has been said in this House and in the debate in the National Assembly earlier in this week about the deployment of the SANDF in the Eastern DRC. It is a debate that is welcome and necessary because South Africa's role in peacekeeping missions is indeed fundamental to the pursuit of peace, stability, and development in our own country, in the region where our country is located, and on our continent. The decision to deploy our armed forces is not taken lightly, particularly when that deployment may put our defense force members in harm's way. While South Africa has contributed to the SADC mission in the DRC, we have always maintained that an inclusive negotiated resolution is required to achieve lasting peace in the region. And we therefore welcome the outcome of the joint summit, a joint summit which was really historic in that it brought together SADC and the East African community over the weekend, and where we agreed that direct negotiations and dialogue must resume between all state parties as well as non-state parties, including M23. Now, we as South Africa insisted that non-state parties must also be included, and that M23, which has now invaded and taken over Goma, must also be part of this negotiation and dialogue. And we were able during that discussion to put forward our own experience as a nation, that as we brought the horror of apartheid to an end, it was incumbent on all of us to include state parties and non-state parties in the negotiation, and in the end, that is what finally led to the settlement of the apartheid horror. And we were able to share that with our colleagues and compatriots at the summit. And the message did sink in. And going forward, we are now going to see a dialogue that is going to involve state parties as well as non-state parties, all of them involved in an effort to bring an end to that conflict. The outcomes from the joint summit are in confidence-building measures towards a sustainable peace, which will finally lead to the drawdown of the SADC troops. As South Africa, we will do whatever is within our means to support the peace effort, so that this conflict should finally end and the people of the region should finally know peace. This weekend, I'll be traveling to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia for the 38th ordinary session of the Assembly of Heads of States and Government of the African Union. The AU has designated the theme for 2025 as Justice for Africans and People of African Descent through reparations. South Africa and Ghana have been nominated to champion this theme. We will focus on actively engaging the African diaspora to foster meaningful connections and encourage investment in our countries. This initiative is about more than reparations. It is a powerful call for unity, empowerment, and the upliftment of our continent. And together we will forge a resilient continent where hopes thrive, allowing people of African descent to reconnect meaningfully with their continent. We live in times of great uncertainty that are impacted by geopolitical events that are unfolding way beyond our shores. Closer to home, we have considerable challenges to overcome if we are to build a country free, or freedom rather, with true equality and shared prosperity for all. And this, in my view, is a time of opportunity and hope. Now, the Government of National Unity represents the best of that hope. We have demonstrated that we are prepared to put our political differences aside and work for the common good of all South Africans. And we have decided that we are not going to sit on the sidelines and make noise. We've decided that we are going to fold our sleeves and get right into the center of what needs to be done. Now, this government remains united in pursuit of South Africa that improves the material prospects of every South African man and woman and child. And we are committed to upholding our hard-won democracy. We are also committed to expanding the frontiers of opportunity for all South Africans. As we do so, We're guided, as I've said in the past, by our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and the rule of law. And as we rise from this debate, I am convinced that despite our differences, we share a common desire for a South Africa that belongs to all who live in it. And from what I have heard in this debate, this desire is shared by all sides of this House. And that to me is heartening, because it is this vision of a nation that works for all. Even those who were critical of what is being done in government were also united in saying we do need a vision that is going to take this country forward. They were able to put proposals forward and also criticism forward. And let me say as I close, the proposals that you have put forward and criticisms are taken seriously. And I will certainly be spending a considerable amount of time going through your speeches and seeing what is best that we can draw from what was said here to take South Africa forward. So let us all unite to take this country forward and work hard for the people who elected us to come here. And thank you very much for your participation in the debate.
We thank the Honourable, the President, for a well reply to the debate. That concludes the debate on the State of the Nation address and the business of the day. Honourable members, the joint sitting is adjourned. Thank you.
I can hear you. Can hear you. We can, yeah.
Welcome back, and that concludes the SONA debate. Of course, we had the State of the Nation address last week on the 6th of February, the debate over 2 days, the 11th and the 12th of February, and today the President has just replied to all those concerns and suggestions that members have raised during the past 2 days.
And as Tshepo has indicated, today marks the end of the debates and the reply on the 2025 State of the Nation address, the first for the 7th Parliament and for the Government of National Unity. There's been robust debate the past 2 days from members of the opposition, from members of the Government of National Unity. And today the President responded to some of the concerns that had been raised during those debates. And just to remind you that as he had just concluded his reply, he will be preparing to make his way to Pretoria, where he is expected later this evening to receive the remains of the 14 soldiers that lost their lives in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo.
Of course, he's going to hand them over to the families that have anticipated their loved ones' return since their death in the DRC during that peacekeeping mission. We are inviting you also to remember that next week is the budget speech by Mr. Enoch Godongwana, Minister Enoch Godongwana, who will be delivering the budget speech, the first one for the 7th administration. And of course, the second one, it's the first official one under the Government of National Unity, and that is next week on the 19th of February 2025.
Yes, and Tsepo has rightfully put it, this will be his first budget speech. You should remember that last year in October, he delivered the medium-term budget policy statement, which sets the mood for the budget, budget speech that we're expecting him to present to the nation next week on Wednesday, wherein the president has delivered the government's priority areas for the year, and now the Minister of Finance must put finances into those commitments so that we are able to move forward as a country, and all those commitments that had been outlined by the president are fulfilled.
Of course, the work of Parliament continues, and you can stay tuned and go on to YouTube, Facebook, X, TikTok, and even IG at Parliament of RSA, and watch all the portfolio committees, standing committees, and select committees as they hold the executive to account. Of course, you can follow us, join the conversation, and have your say. Of course, it is your Parliament, your voice, your future. Thank you so much for joining us today. Libito laka ke Tshepo Mori.
Ntwana emele isizwe samampondomise kutsolo. Igama lam ndinguThembi Nkosi Ngoma.
That's a goodbye from us.
Goodbye.
South Africa's Parliament will proudly host the 11th G20 Parliamentary Speakers Summit, known as the P20, bringing together leaders from G20 national parliaments to shape global policies and reinforce parliamentary oversight in international decision-making. As the first African country to lead the P20, South Africa's Parliament is championing Africa's active participation in global governance and economic policymaking, ensuring the continent is a driving force in shaping the future we want. Parliament will play a critical oversight role, ensuring that South Africa's commitments as G20 president translate into real economic growth, job creation, and social development. The P20 summit will embed African perspectives in global decision-making, ensuring that policies on trade, technology, and governance reflect the continent's needs and aspirations. In alignment with SONA 2025's theme, harnessing parliamentary diplomacy for the realization of global solidarity, equality, and sustainability, Parliament is committed to fostering international collaboration for a better, more just world. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.